Boy Rava. What about Tola Atzmoi the Avir Azar? What if someone wasn't actually standing on the floor of the Azar, but he somehow suspended himself in the air? He hung himself off a drone, or he was standing on some type of stand that allowed him to be in the air. And Rashi says the shear of Shahia, meaning the amount of time that he would either be chayiv korish if it was mazid, or chayiv a korban oil of yerd if it was a shogi. Ma, what is that? He give me your shia. This halacha l'moshe Sinai of shehiyah. Does that mean shehiyah the basish tachava? It has to be the type of shehiyah that he could bow down in, meaning he's standing on the ground. The lav basish tachavaya, but if he's floating in the air, where it's impossible for him to be bowing down while he is suspended in air, lo gemiri the halacha l'moshe Sinai does not apply. Oidilma bifnim shehiyah gemiri. Anything that's in the Beis Hamikdash, the halacha l'moshe Sinai of Shehiyah applies, meaning it has to be that shear. Loishna the basish tachavaya, v'loishna the lav basish tachavaya. After the Gemara teku. Okay, these are all interesting shilas because the likelihood of this actually occurring is, I would say, relatively low. But the shilah really is: what is the din of what is the halacha l'moshe Sinai of Shehiyah? Is it anywhere in the airspace or it's stopped on the ground? Amen. Boy Ravashi. Ravashi is another shayla. What would happen if Timei Atzmoi b'mezid? Now this is an interesting shayla. Rashi explains. Im Tim Tzaloimar. So it's based on the Friedike shayla that we ended off with yesterday. Im Tim Tzaloimar that Tzorich Shehiyah L'Malchus B'tumas Oynis v'yeshias v'shehiyas amazing. If you're going to tell me that you need shia l'malchus when you became tamei b'oinus, because if you were matame yourself, obviously you're going to be chayiv for being matame yourself inside the azor. So you became tamei by mistake, and you purposely waited there, right? If you hold that you need shia even for malchus, tumas mezid mi boy shehiyah. If you made yourself tamei on purpose, would that need a shia, or would you automatically be chayiv? Do we say ba'onis gemiri shehiyah dafka if you became tamei by mistake? That's where the halacha Moshe Sinai was said. Oy dilma b'fnim gemiri shehiyah loishna ba'onis v'loishna b'mezid, or is it a shear that applies to any tuma that happens in the Azara, no matter what the scenario is, it always has the din of Shia. Dr. Gemara, teku. Let's just take a quick peek in Toshus. This is a very important Toshus, and it's really nageya to what we learned yesterday of Shehiyah L'Malchus. So Toshus asks, Sarch Shehiyah L'Malchus. So Toshus wants to drill down a little bit to understand what's going on. So Zog Toshus, B'time Atzmoi B'shoigigari. It's of course speaking if he wasn't matam himself on purpose, because if he was matam himself on purpose, then for sure he'll be chayiv. So it means he became tamei by mistake, and now the question is how quickly does he have to get out of there? But if there was a sheretz in the Beis Hamikdash, the history boy, and they warned him, be careful, stay away from the sheretz, you shouldn't become tamei. Then below shianami milkalaki. Of course, you would get the malchus for being matami yourself in the azara, even if you didn't wait a second. And as soon as you became tamei, you ran out. The mere fact that you were bemazed matami yourself in the azara would get malchus. What about a nazir who basic forest? You have a nazir that's in a basic forest. Now, a nazir is not allowed to be matama himself, but he already is inside a basic forest. Mi boy shehiyah oiloi. Does he need shehiyah, or is he instantly chayiv malchus for violating his nazirs? The Ka'amar hechidami, and the Gemara there says hechidami. Let's analyze this more carefully. Ilema the Ka'amri lay. If the Edom are telling him loy sinzar, So the question was, he was in the basic forest, and in the basic forest, he wanted to be mekabel upon himself Naziris, thereby being over an Isser. Because if he's Tameh, he shouldn't make himself into a Nazir. So they told him, license and don't make yourself into a Nazir. Mi ba Yeshia, there the Gemara wanted to know if instantly when he was mekabel Naziris, he was over, or only if he waits there a little bit. So you see from there that and the Gemara said it can't be that case. It can't be that case. It can't be speaking about a case where he did it b'mezid. If you do b'mezid, that's going to be an issue. The ain't and don't ask a kasha. The hasam boy Rava I gemir shira avroi. There Rava clears a shaila if there's a din shia outside, because there it's nazar basic forest. It's not in the Beis Hamikdash, right? Our shaila over here is to what level have we learned the halach of shehiyah? B'fnim. There it's al b'chutz. Al b'fnim l'malkus pshita legamrei shehiyah. There, Rava seems to assume that there's always a requirement of the shehiyah if it's a question of anything that's going on in the Beis Hamikdash. The whole discussion there is shehiyah out of the Beis Hamikdash. Now, our Gemara has a shaila even l'malkus if you need shehiyah. The Hasan boy in Timsa Loimer the b'fnim gemir shehiyah l'malkus b'chutz mayu. So there they're just asking if you are pushed the shaila that by b'fnim you always need shehiyah. What would be b'chutz? But we don't. In the Gemara, we're still clearing if even b'fnim you need shehiyah l'malkus. Okay, Gavaltik. Let's just nash a little bit on this Tosfos because Tosfos also shares some important, relevant information. Oy ein tzarich shehiyah l'malkus. So maybe you don't need shehiyah l'malkus. Hagamashma the lucky ashehiyah. It's mashma over here that the malchus that you're getting is for the shehiyah, for the fact that you didn't leave right away when you were tamei, you found yourself to be tamei in the asara. The loikamaboyla ella tzarich shehiyah kishirish tachava oiloi. Right, that's the whole discussion. How long of a shehiyah do you need? Is it it's like a 2-second shehiyah, or do you need to do shehiyah the amount that the halacha l'moshe mashina dictates legabe achiv kares or legabe achiv karbon oil v'yerid? Because of Freitoshes, the Perk Basar the Makos, Tanan, Gabahoyalovish Klaim, if he was wearing Klaim, but Amruloi, we learned this Gemara not too long ago in Makos, if he was wearing Shavuos, Amruloi, they told him, Al Tilbosh. They kept on telling him, you should know you're not allowed to wear Klaim. They kept on giving him Asura, who Poishet Velovish, and he kept on taking it off and putting it back on. And every time before he was going to put it back on, they said Al Tilbosh. So there it says Chayiv Al Kol Achas V'achas. You're chayiv for every single time you put on the beged of klai. Yomer Bibi, and the Bibi said there in the Gemara, loy poishet v'loy v'shmamish. It doesn't literally mean that he took off the whole beged and he put it on again. That's poishet. You get multiple malchiyas for that. Rather, elamachlis umoitzi yadoy v'veis unkali shaloi. If he's merely taking off the sleeve and putting the sleeve back on, so a partial levisha. That also would get him a malchus. That's what Rav Bibi said. And Rav Ashi, now let's just remind you who the shilas over here are asked by. The shilas here are asked by Rav Ashi, and Rav Ashi says over there, Rav Ashi Omar afilu loy shah elo kedei liv shoyt v'lil boish. Rav Ashi says if someone's wearing a beged of Shabbos and they keep on warning him, you're not allowed to wear a beged, and he's wearing it long enough to take it off and put it on multiple times, he'll still get malchus merely for leaving the beged on. That's what Rabashi says. Rabashi clearly says that shehiyah is something that you would get malchus for. Michlal der of Bibi, loy mechayev b'shehiyah. Can you not be medayik that Rav Bibi would hold that shehiyah is not something you can get malchus for? You actually have to do an action, like put on the sleeve. So from a Bibi we see that clearly shehiyah is something that you would not get malchus for. So is our shaila here totally in that machlokes between Rabashi and Rabibi, where Rabashi says you could be mechuyev malchus for doing nothing, just for shehiyah, and Rabibi holds you have to do an action? Yesh loimer, the Rabibi le polagad Ravashi, even by the case of shatnez, where Rabibi requires an action, he only argues in Ravashi, ella deloy nochas lashmi'inon chidish shel shehiyah. He wasn't talking about the chiddush of shehiyah. That's not what the point of contention that he has with Rabashi. Elo lashmi'inon the bachnosas beis unkali chayiv afal pi sheini loivish kalamalbish. All his point is it doesn't have to be the time to put on the whole malbush, even if Shia would be a reason to be mechayev. The Shia kadei halvasha means the Shia long enough to only put on the sleeve, but he's not commenting on the chiddush of Shia. He's just commenting on the length of time. It doesn't have to be a full halvasha; it only has to be putting on the sleeve. So therefore, Rav Bibi's opposition to Rav Ashi over there in Makis wouldn't be relevant in our sugya. Inami, or another reason why Rav Bibi's opposition to Rav Ashi in Makis wouldn't be relevant to our sugya. Inami Rav Bibi loylaki ashihia mishum davalav shem b'maisa. The reason why he disagreed with Rav Ashi is because it's a lav shem b'maisa, and he holds that a lav shem b'maisa ain't like an lav. So you have to do an action. You got to put on your sleeve. But v'hacha I read leman damer lav shem b'maisa like an lav. But maybe our sugya is going with the understanding that you do get malchus even for a lav shem b'maisa, and I think we could all agree that shehiyah is a lav shem b'maisa. You're not doing anything. Inami, or another option you could say is Iri le'inyan isser malchus v'loy le'inyan chiyuv. Maybe the discussion here is not le'inyan chiyuv malchus. It means are you over an isser or not, but not that you actually get malchus for because it's a lav shem b'maisa. So this is what I want to bring out. Tosfos is saying the shaila over here might not even be if you actually get malchus without shehiyah. The question is if there's an isser that normally would be associated with malchus because of the shehiyah, but you're not really going to get malchus because it's not a lav sheyesh b'maisa. There's no maisa involved. Rabashi the Palak Hasan and Rabashi who argues by shatness on Rav Bibi and holds you don't have to do anything. Just keeping the beggar of shatness on you is going to be mechayev you malchus. Koshav shehiyah kemaisa. He holds that leaving a beggar on you is as if you're doing something, a positive action. How do you get to that? Kivon the tchilas halavisha aydei maisa. Since how did the shehiyah begin? He put on the beggar first. If you become tummy because the sheretz touches you, there is never any maisa that you did that is associated with the shehiyah. But the shehiyah of shatness is much worse because you have to first put on the beggar. That maisa will be the maisa that you could be mechuyev for, even though you're going to be receiving multiple malchus for multiple violations. That one maisa at the beginning of all these violations counts. And this is another very important point that Tosfos speaks out. Even if you don't need shia kadesh tachavoya, so even if you're going to be poshet the shaila that the halacha l'moshe Sinai of kadesh tachavoya only applies to a chi of carbon oil v'yored or to a chi of chorus, but not to malchus, mikamokan ba'inon kidei yitzia uchnisa. You still have to be there the amount of time that it would take to go out and go in again, which is much less than the shir tachavoya. But you have to wait there a little bit, otherwise it's not shia. If you didn't even wait for a second, for sure there wouldn't be a chiv malchus. Just like by klayim, we know you have to stay there a lot. You have to be wearing the klayim for a minimal amount of time, enough to take it off and put it on again. So even if you don't need the kadesh tachavoya, there still has to be some minimal amount of time that the shia has to be. The nearest of Tosfos, the gemiri shehiyah kadesh tachavoya lamalkos b'mikdash uvenazir. Even if we do say that the shir of kadesh tachavoya applies anywhere in the mikdash and by nazir, hainim shum dedamu l'shehiyah de carbon. That's only because they're still similar to the shehiyah of a carbon. They got a mikdash, so they all have some connection to the base of mikdash. But if we're talking about shehiyah in reference to klayim, which has no shaykhs to kachim whatsoever, pshita the loy gemiri, it's pashut that the din shehiyah does not apply to klayim. The loy shaykh hasam hishtachavoya klal. There, the whole concept of hishtachavoya only applies if we're talking about something that has a connection to kachim. That's where it would be relevant. But if we're talking about something that has nothing to do with kachim, such as klayim, there's no shayla ever to consider that you should need shehiyah kedei hishtachavoya. Now we have to the next shaila, and that is if someone was metama himself b'mezid. So Rashi explained this shaila as intim saloymar tzarich shila malchus v'tumas oinus u'shias mezid. What would be if you were metama yourself b'mezid? Do you need shehiyah at all or not? So Tosfos says tzarich loymer. You must say that at the moment that someone was purposely metama himself, lo yoda shaya b'mikdash. He didn't know that he was in the base of mikdash at the time. The Yoda, the Timayatz b'mezid, if someone is in the base of mikdash and he's aware of the fact that he's in the base of mikdash and he's b'mezid being matam himself, afilu shakach acherkach, even if he forgot later, loy mechayev carbon. He could never be chayev a carbon because that's mamish amazing. The loy shav mi yidiyase have. You only chayev a carbon for someone of had you realized that this was the case. Had I known this was chaylev, I wouldn't have eaten it. I wouldn't have eaten it. Had I known I was in the Beis Hamikdash, I wouldn't have been matam myself. But here he was matam himself amazing with full knowledge that he was in the Beis Hamikdash. Vila Malchus, boy, and if you need if you get Malchus for that, tzarich loymar the lahisru boy ela la'achar shetimay atzmai. If it's a question of getting Malchus, then they had to have warned him. So they couldn't have warned him before he was matam himself. You have to say they only warned him after he was matam himself. The mitzvah by kodim loy boy shia could appear leil. Because if they warned him before he was matam himself, we said in the previous Tosfos that of course he would get Malchus right away. So it's obviously speaking in the case where they only warned him after he was matam himself, and that's where it would be relevant. Would he get Malchus if he stays? Do you need Shia? Because you only need Shia if he got there in the first place without a chiyuv. Okay, so let's see the Gemara weiter. Boy Rav Ashi, Nazir bekever. If someone is a Nazir and he's in a kever, so let's look at the case exactly. Nazir shenitma ba'onis, a Nazir that became tamei through no fault of his own, besoich basic forest. So he's already in the basic forest, so he already is tamei, and then he became tamei a second time because a mace touched him. Dum yad nitma ba'azara shaloi nischayev bichnisasai. It has to be a case where coming in wasn't the chiyuv, wasn't mechayivim, he was already there. So he was already there, and now he becomes tamei again. So what would be the case? Now the question is, if he's in the basic forest already, and he's already tamei, so he's not getting any more tamei by a mace touching him, he already is tamei for being in the basic forest. So the shaila is a little bit difficult to understand what is the case. So Rashi says, he was in a sealed box. He was taken into the basic forest in a sealed box. So therefore, he's not going to become tamei from the basic forest. He's in the basic forest in a way where he's protected and isolated from being tamei. And then then someone took off the cover. So now the box that he's in is no longer in oil. So tumah will penetrate it. And then v'nitner ba'avir basic forest. And he became tamei due to the avir of the basic forest, and then the Hisru boy say, and then they told him leave right now, v'lo yotza, and he didn't leave. That would be the shayla. Umi lo shah kadesh tachavoya. He didn't wait to shir tachavoya because then, of course, we know he brings a carbon other v'yorid or he's chayiv paris. So boy Ravashi nazir bekever, boy shiel malchus or ein tzarich. So how did he get in the first place? He got in because he was protected and he was isolated from tumah. Then, while he was in the basic forest, he became tamei. So now the question is, how long does he have to wait there to be chayiv malchus? Dr. Gemara, do you say b'fnim gemiri shehiyah? Do you say that the whole limud of shehiyah is only b'fnim, but the chutz loy gemiri shehiyah? Or dilma ba'oinis gemiri shehiyah loishna b'fnim loishna b'chutz? Or no, anytime there's a situation of someone becoming tamei ba'oinis, is the shear of his kadesh tachavoya. It doesn't matter if it's in the basement or out, and the Gemara teku. And we just learned Tosfos a moment ago that defines this question. He says, why would we think that Nazir, which is not in the Beis Hamikdash, has anything to do with the halacha l'Moshe min Sinai of shehiyah with the shear of his tachavaya? So because Nazir also has a connection to kachim. Nazir brings a carbon, but Kalayim, which has no shaychus whatsoever to kachim, by Kalayim we don't even clear the shayla. Because there's no reason to assume that the halacha l'Moshe min Sinai said legabi someone coming to the Beis Hamikdash should apply to Kalayim. But the Gemara is clearing maybe it does apply to Nazir because Nazir also has some connection to kachim. Okay, the halacha is zakta helig mishnah ba loy ba'arucha chayiv b'ktzara pater. If he goes out the long way, then he's chayiv because he's there longer than he needed to be. But b'ktzara, if he took the shortest path out, the direct route out, then he will be pater. So that sounds like such a simple statement. Watch what a Talmudist could do with a simple statement like that. Zok tehilek gemara. Amar Papa. Ktsara shamru. That we say that if you take the shortest route out, you're going to be pater, It's even if you're walking very slowly. It doesn't give you a time limit. It says the route that you need to take is the shortest route out. Even if you literally put one foot directly in front of the other foot, you're taking very small steps, but not large strides. So even if it's one small step for mankind, it's still going to be potter because you took the shortest route. Even if you took your merry old time and you walk very slow, as Rashi says, he went very, very slowly, he's still going to be potter because the fact is he took the shortest route out. What happened if it took him a day to get out of the Beis Hamikdash because he walked very slow on the shortest route? So he's not chayiv. Well, what if in between steps he paused, not long enough to be Kadesh Tachavoya, but if you add up all of his pauses from when he started to leave till when he got out, it would have added up to a Kadesh Tachavoya. So can you combine them to give him a carbon other Yared? Ma'ashit start with Rashi. He was taking the shortest route, but he took a small pause in between steps. So Ma'ashit start with L'chshir, can you add up all of the mini pauses and combine them to a Shehiyah of Kadesh Tachavoy? Why can't you repulse the Shaila from Rava's own words? What does that mean? The loy mistarfi, they shouldn't be mitzaref. Clearly, it's not a time issue; it's a route issue. So all you're doing is focusing on the route that he took to get out. What's the difference? We don't care if it takes him all day. So therefore, time is not a factor here, and therefore, what is the shaila that should be mitzaref? It surely would not be mitzaref as long as you took the shortest route out. So no, that's not a raya. If you're constantly moving at a steady pace, albeit a very slow, steady pace, that's where we say that since you're taking the shortest route, you're going to be potter. But if you actually stopped and paused, that's a whole different story. That's still a shaila bias. So you see, nothing's clear cut. We learned the mission. It seems so simple. Shortest with potter, longest with chai, but there's so many different ways to look at this. Abaye asked a question of Rabba, and it's funny that Rashi now tells us a klal in all of Shas from this Gemara of Abaye asking from Rabba. So let's just look at Rashi's Shas klal. Boy minei Abaye me Rabba. Who is this Rabba? It's Rabba bar Nachmeni Shoya Rabba. It was known that Rabba bar Nachmeni was the Rebbe of Abaye. And now Rashi v'chol heicha diika boy minei, it's Rabba who v'loy Rava. Whenever Abaye is asking the shaila of a Rava or a Rabba, you should know it's always Rabba. It's Rabba who he would have asked the shailas to. So this was the shaila. Ba'loi barucha shir katsara. What if the shortest route would take 3 seconds, the longest route will take 15 seconds, and he took the long route, but he walked so quickly he did it in less than 3 seconds? Now, shir gemiri. Do we learn the halacha l'Moshe b'Sinai of a shir, meaning there would be a chiyuv, and therefore v'chiba loy barucha shir k'tzar potter. So what does shir mean? We're learning a shir of how much time he has to be there. How much time does he have to be there? The time that it takes to take the shortest route out. So if the halacha l'Moshe b'Sinai taking the short route out is the timing of the shortest route, which is 3 seconds, let's say. So if he went a longer route, but he also got out in the same period of time, maybe it will be potter. Adilma dafka gemiri, barucha chaye b'tzar potter. Maybe no. We look at the route. The time is not relevant to us. Let's see Rashi. Bolay barucha b'shir k'tzara. Sheyotza b'derech harucha. He took the long way out. Avol rotz b'merutza, but he ran so quickly. Achaloy shah b'yitziasay elak yeshir derech k'tzara. The amount of time that it would take a normal walk to get out in the short route, let's say that was 3 seconds, he got out in that same sheer of 3 seconds, but he took a longer route. So the Gemara wants to know: is it a time? Is it when we have?
See from the other one.
I'm sorry.
We saw from the shorter route. It takes very long.
What's the Shiloh? That was the Gemara doesn't pass. The Gemara is the Shiloh. The Gemara thought to say that it's all about the route. But the Gemara says Hashem B'Dilasha.
Even if it took him a whole day.
Right.
The time doesn't make a difference. It's just shorter route.
You mean so from Rava saying that? I hear, but I guess this is Abaye. Right, so you're right. But from Rava, it's mashma that it's a root issue for sure, not a time issue. Or maybe no, maybe I mean, because if it's a time issue, then if you walk slow on the derech tzur, you should be chayiv. You're right. That's a good point. So it must be that Abaye. So maybe that's why Rashi speaks out. Abaye is not asking this of Rava; he's asking it of a Rabba. Because if he's asking it of Rava was pushed the side already. So now, okay, I was wondering why Rashi put of all places sticks it over here. Yeah. He sticks it over here because of Mati Shaila. Yeah. Mati saying from Rava, it would be clear that this would be a problem. It would be a problem to take the long route out. So in Echanami, if that's why Rashi maybe said that it's Rabba that we're talking about. Correct. So now I understand Rashi. Kavaltik. Zog to Gemara Vayter. See, sometimes I could understand Rashi taking the short route. Sometimes I need the roundabout route to chap Rashi. So now I chap Rashi with the roundabout route. Okay, Zog to Gemara. Lo dilmo davka gemiri barucha chai b'kshar potter. Amalei Rabba answered, Lo nitna arucha lidachos etzlo. What does that mean? It's an interesting comment. So it actually says, Lo nitna arucha lidachos etzlo lahatir afilu b'merutza. There's never an allowance. You're never allowed to take the long route out, even if you could make it faster. You must take the shortest route out. So Rabba was paskening that if you took the long route out, even though you made it very quickly, you would still be chayiv, which actually is consistent with Rava, that it's not about time, it's about the route. Zok Gemara, Matzka Flor Abzeir. So Abzeir had a kash on this. El the Kaim alone, we have an assumption that Tomei Sheshimesh is Bemisa. A kohen who did avoida while he was Tomei is chayiv Misa, he's chayiv Misa b'dei Shemayim. And Rashi tells us, Rashi says, I don't really need to tell you because you just learned it in Sanhedrin, so you know already. But I'm going to mention it anyway. Koyin Tameh Sheshimesh Bazaras B'Misha B'Dei Shemaim. That's one of the people who are Chayiv Misha B'Dei Shemaim, which we learned in Elohim as well. So the question is, Heichim Ishkachasla. How will it be possible? And Rashi explains, Heichim Ishkachasla Dein Bakaris. How is it possible that the Koyin will be Chayiv Misha B'Dei Shemaim for doing avodah when he's Tameh, without him having a chiv chorus? Because if you waited there for a certain amount of time, kadesh tachavoya, he's chayiv chorus. So forget the avodah, he's chayiv chorus just for being there. Al koichach benitma bazara hu demishkachas. Of course, it's talking about a kohen who wasn't Tomei and then he entered the azara b'tomosei. He's mamish chayiv chorus for that without any waiting at all. It must be that he became Tomei mistakenly while he was in the azara. Even nitma b'chutz v'nichnas he chayiv lekoros b'chnisosei. He would already be chayiv chorus the moment he walked in. So there's no question of Mishav the Shemayim. So the Gemara fears us to Shaila. Heichim Ishkachasla. Either loy shah, if he didn't wait there a second, heichi avad avoida. How can you possibly do avoida if he got out of there in a split? It's impossible. And either shah, and if he had to spend time doing the avoida, well then that's for sure at least 5-6 seconds, which is kadesh tachavoya. So then bar chorus. So where will he be only chayiv Mishav b'dei Shemayim and not chorus? If he stayed there that length of time of Kadesh Tachavoya, then he'll be Chayiv Chorus. And if he didn't stay Kadesh Tachavoya, what type of Avodah could he have done in such a short period of time? If you're going to tell me Bishlema that Bechol Shiur de Mesnisen, all of the Shiurim of the Mishnah, Bein Bishia, Bein B'Yitzia Rucha, it's Shiur Gemiri Lechiyov, meaning, Kagoyin Shir Shia, B'Yitzia Tzara, Oy shir yitzias arucha beloy shehia. So if you're going to tell me that it's merely a shir, then mishkachas law the onus nafshei viktsara v'avodah. Then you could say that it's speaking. If it's a time function, if it's a time that the halacha mashum shinai is focusing on, so that you could say he went out the shortest route possible. But so there will be no of chorus because he took the shortest route, and he ran so fast in the shortest route that even with the avodah, it still didn't take him longer than the normal shortest route should have taken him. So, for instance, let's say the shortest route would have taken him 5 seconds. He took the shortest route, and he was out within 5 seconds. But he ran so fast that out of those 5 seconds, he had 4 seconds to spare, and he did the avodah in those 4 seconds. So he was able to get the avodah in and still get out of there in the amount of time that was allotted to him, which is the shir tzara. So if that's the case, then it makes sense. But if you're going to tell me you have to take the shortest route and you can't stop, so then weiter, it's impossible for him to have had only a case of mitzvah b'dei shemayim. So Zok to Gemara, Zok Rashi, going to understand Biktsara, la'achar sheshimesh. After he did a voida, and he used up 3 of his 5 seconds, then Yotzaloi Biktsara, he ran so fast in the shortest route, so Rashi said a little bit differently than what I said. Rashi said that if it takes 5 seconds to get out, you have 5 seconds plus the amount of time of the Shihiyah. So you have 5 seconds, and even if you waited a little bit, but remember, you have to wait a Shihir Shtachavoya. So let's say Shihir Shtachavoya is 5 seconds, and the shortest route out is 5 seconds, then you have up to 9 seconds, and you're free, right? Because even if it took you 9 seconds, it shouldn't be a problem, because you didn't wait a Shihir Shtachavoya. So that's what Rashi is proposing. Ella, that's only good if you say it's a time issue. But Rabbah and Rabbah both said it has nothing to do with the time issue. It's all about taking the shortest route and getting out of there. Ali Amr Dafka Gemiri, which is how Rabbah and Rabbah both learn. How is it possible that you can delay your Yitzhak to do the Avodah and it won't be a violation of Kares? And therefore, how could you have Mitzvah B'dei Shamayim? Rabbi, my kusha, I have a very simple solution. Mishkachas law, Kagon Shabbat Tsar, he was walking straight out in the shortest route. But while he was walking, he passed by the Mizbeach, and he had a large fork in his hand, and he reached up onto the Mizbeach while he's walking, and he flipped over a piece of meat that was burning on the Mizbeach. That is an avodah. So he did an avodah while he was tamei in the Beis HaMikdash, in a scenario where he would not be chayiv kares because he was getting out in the shortest route. Now you might tell me, turning over a piece of meat is an avodah. Yes, Rav Huna tells us that it is, because he said Zor Shavach B'Tzinoira Chayiv Misa. If a non-kohen does avodah, what avodah? He just flips over a piece of meat so that it should burn better. That's Chayiv Misa because he did avodah, so that would be an avodah for a kohen as well. So that that makes sense. He's running out of the Beis HaMikdash because he's tamei, so he's not going to be chayiv kares. And while he's running, he gives it a flip over. It doesn't even delay him a nanosecond. Zokt the Hilig Rashi. Mishkachas law, ba'avoida beloy shehiyah, Ishanitmai became tamei, the Yotzami Adviktor, and he instantly made a beeline for the shortest distance out. But the derech yitziyasoi, haya oiches mazleik biyadoi, he was holding a big pitchfork in his hand. The hikaboy be'echad min ha'evarim sh'al ha'maracha, he's able to reach up with that stick while he's walking and flip over a piece of meat. The havach ma'shalamai l'lamata, and he moved a piece of meat that was on the top of the pile to the bottom of the pile. Because Rav Huna said, Zor shahabach b'tzinoira, avodah, that's considered an avodah shemekarav kuloi, because it helps it burn faster. The yeshkan avodah below shia. Now you have a hechatimsa of an avodah without a shia. Chayiv misa mishum vazor hakarev yumas. Very interesting shayla. Gufa. Now we have another shayla. Rav Huna. Zor shahabach b'tzinoira chayiv misa. Rav Huna told us this halacha, that a zor who merely flipped over a piece of meat, that's considered an avodah and he's chayiv misa. Hechadami. Let's analyze exactly the scenario. There's nothing simple in Talmud. Everything we have to split hairs to understand the details. What if the scenario was that had he not done this activity, whatever it was, he moved the meat around, it would have never burned properly. So he actually made that it should burn. Shita. So of course he's chayiv. Himamish, it's like putting the emurim on the mizbeach. Of course he's chayiv. It's not even a chiddush. And if where it was on the mizbeach it would have burnt anyway, so he really didn't do anything. The ma'akov, then why is he doing an avodah? The avodah was done when the meat was put on the mizbeach. Him flipping it doesn't have any impact. It would have burnt anyway. So why should he be chayiv for it? Had he not touched it, it would have burnt, but it would have taken 2 hours. But now that he flipped it and moved it over, it's going to burn in 1 hour. So he made it burn faster. And the chiddush of Rav Huna is the chol keruve avoida avoidei, merely hastening the avoida, hastening the burning of the emurim on the mizbeach is considered an avoida as well. Omer Vaishya, beina the ema milsa. I actually have a cheshik I want to say over halakha, but I'm afraid of my friends that are going to attack me for this halakha, and this is the halakha. Hanichnas leveis hamenuga derech achayev. what if someone walks in to a house that has a nega, and it says kolabal abayis, says in the pasuk v'haba el abayis kol yimahiskar. I said while the house is locked up, when we're analyzing to see if it has a nega, yitma da'ara. So what if you came in backwards? So it doesn't have the status of v'haba el abayis, because v'haba means the normal way, and he walked in backwards. Derech ha'charev. Even though his whole body is inside this house, but his nose is sticking out of the house, tahar, he will still be tahar. And we touch derech bia asra Torah. It's only if you come in the normal way. So why am I afraid? Why am I afraid of my friends to say this? Because ihachi nami. So they'll ask me, so why dafka if his nose is sticking out? If he came in backwards, even though he's fully inside the house, he still didn't come to the house derech bia. So he still shouldn't be tummy. That's why I'm afraid. Amar Rava, so Rava told Rabbi Yosy, don't be afraid of your friends. There's a very good reason as to why he would be tummy if he's fully in. And it's not because of the pasuk of habalabais, because in fact, habalabais means dafka, coming in the right way, not backwards. But there's another reason why he's tummy. You know why? The chsiv, it says v'tziva koyin ufinu es habayis. Before the koyin would paskin anything, he would tell them take everything out of the house. B'terem yavo yakoyin liris sonaga. Why? Because v'lo yitma kol asher babayis. Since everything that's contained in the house will become tamei, and we don't want the person to lose all those things that he has in his house, we tell him to take out all of the things from his house before the koyin paskins on the nega. So Zokt Rava, if he's fully inside the house, he's no different than any other keli in the house. So without the vabal abayis, he would be tamei if he's fully in the house and his nose wasn't sticking out, because he's considered kol asher babayis, which has a din of tumah because it's totally inside the house, and the Torah tells us beferish that becomes tamei. Tanya Namiyochi, we have a brisa that says a similar thing. Gagin halolu, the roofs in the Azara. So they were the main ground level, and they were roofs, like in the Esros Noshim, there was roofs where people stood up on. There ain't oichlin sham koche kochim. That does not have the status of the Azara, and therefore you're not allowed to eat carbonas that have to be eaten within the Azara. You could only eat them on the ground. You can't eat them on the roof. The ain't sheikhtin sham kodeshim kalim. You cannot check kodeshim kalim because again, kodeshim kalim have to be checked somewhere in the Azara. And if you're not on the floor of the Azara, it's not considered that you are in the Azara. V'tamei shenichnas derech gagin lehechol, and somebody who was tamei, who came into the hechol through the roof, potter, he'll be potter. Why? Because it says ve'lamikdash loy savoi dafka derech bia asra Torah. And normal people don't come in through the chimney. Normal people come in through the door, and therefore you won't violate kol habal abayis if you come in through the roof. Now, as an aside, we don't have much time. As an aside, the Gemara here says that the roof, so the second level, I should be clear with my speech. If there's a 2-story building, like the Kodesh Kodeshim had a level above it, that it doesn't say it was not Kodesh. Only the roof is not Kodesh. The Aliyos, if it's a second level, there's a shaila about that. Tosh discusses. But the roofs were definitely not Kodesh. The problem is that this applies not only to the Azara, it also applies to the city of Yerushalayim. And the Gemara Psachim tells us, I think there's a brayta that says that the Yidden, when they were making their Seder in Yerushalayim in the time of the Beis HaMikdash, everybody would go up to their rooftops and they would sing. This way, everyone was singing together. When you're in your house, you're separated from your neighbors. But when everyone's on the roof, everyone was like one big happy family and they're singing Hallel together. And there's a very big kasha on the Rambam, because the Rambam quotes these two halachas that the Gagin are not Niskadish, and he quotes that they did this. So there's a big stira in the Rambam. How could they have eating their carbon pesach up there if it's not considered the floor of the Azara? So this kasha was asked by Rabbi Lezer Sirvos Atzal to Rabbi Meir Simcha. Rabbi Meir Simcha, the Meshach Chachma, he lived in the city of Dvinsk, and there were 2 great gedolim there. The great Ragashavar was there. He was the Rav of the Chassidish community, and Rabbi Meir Simcha was there. He was the Rav of the Litvish community. And Rabbi Lezer Silva's father sent him, I believe, from America to learn in drinks because he wanted them to have exposure to those two great goyim, the Meshech Chochma and the Ragachow. And Reb Eliezer Silver, as a bocher, asked this kasha to Reb Meir Simcha, and it's brought down in Reb Eliezer Silver's sefer that Chaim Tzimar Guli showed. And what happened was the Meshech Chochma had a vegamacht. And what happened was in the Or Sameach and the Rambam, the Meshech Chochma asked the kasha and forever it. So Eliezer Silver said, when I saw the Meshech Chochma, when I saw the Or Sameach, I was very upset. I went over to Reb Simcha and asked him, how come you didn't quote me? You know it was my kasha. So Reb Simcha said, you're a bacher. So Reb Eliezer Silver, it always bothered him that Reb Simcha didn't include him in the sefer when it was his kasha. He's a bacher. So anyway, so Reb Eliezer Silver in his sefer quotes a beautiful teretz from Reb Eliezer Silver's father, and he also has his own teretz. The teretz I don't remember, but the story I remember. But it's an interesting sugya, and it's something that maybe I'll remember if I get time today. Maybe I'll look it up. Zui mitzvah say shebemikdash she'ein chayavin Allah. Remember, the Gemara said that the mitzvah say to leave as soon as you can, to leave the Beis Hamikdash. When you're tamei, that's a mitzvah say you have to leave it, but it's one of the mitzvahs that if Bezdin paskin improperly about it, you are not going. They're not going to have to bring the special carbon when it's called a parhel davishal tzibor when Bezdin paskin's wrong. So and then the Mishnah says, and by contrast, this is only because it's b'mikdash, but a similar scenario, not in the mikdash, like nida, where someone was in the middle of being boiled his wife and she was piercing nida. There, if they paskined wrong on that, they would bring a parhel davishal tzibor because that's not b'mikdash. It's only b'mikdash that you don't bring a parhel davishal tzibor. So, for Gemara, this comment that the Mishnah made was like totally from left field. It had nothing to do with our discussion. So, Heicha Koi, what was the Tana talking about that he decided to interject this factoid that doesn't really have anything to do with the flow of our Mishnah? The Kamar Zui, so the Kamar Hasam Koi. The Tana was in the middle of a sugya in let's see where it is. It's in, I think it's in Hariyos. Yeah, Hariyos. We're talking about the Piskei Halacha, Hariyos, so the best. So the Tana is in Hariyos. He was in the middle of discussing the sugya of Hariyos. And what happened was the Kamar Zui, okay, Hasam Koi, where it says in Hariyos, Ein Chayavin Alasei, the Aloisa Shebemikdash. They're not chayiv a carbon, a pound of tzibor if it's an asay or a loisa that's in the Beis Hamikdash. And the ein meviin asham tali alasay the aloisa shebemikdash. And you also would never bring an asham tali. Now, an asham tali would be a yochid who's not sure if he did something that was chayiv karish or not. If he knew for sure he did something that was chayiv karish, he would bring a chatas. But if he didn't know, then he brings an asham tali. If it's nagei to the Beis Hamikdash, you don't bring it. And one of the reasons is because you only bring Anoshim Tali on something that if you did the Aveira Bavadai, you'd be Chayav Achatos. But in the Beis Hamikdash, if you did a Toma Bavadai, it would be an oil of Yored. It wouldn't be a Chatos. So therefore, for a Sophic, you don't bring Anoshim Tali. Avo Chayovin Alasei V'Aloisa Shabenida. U Mavin Asham Tali Alasei V'Aloisa Shabenida. You also bring Anoshim Tali for it. Because Omar, and therefore the Talmud says, since we're talking about this subject, Zui Mitzvah Sasei Shebemikdash, this is an example. Thomas Mikdash for Kedosh was an example of a mitzvah station Mikdash. Shechayav Nala. Ve'ezo he mitzvah station Benida Shechayav Nala. That was how you mashamish matayra. Varmalon Yitmesi Upirish Miyad Chayiv Mipnei Sheyitziyasai Hanoloy Kiviyasai. Okay, so it's 7:52. So I guess we have to stop here, even though my OCD wants it to finish. But we'll stop here. But it was such a good story with the Blazer Silver. I couldn't hold that back. That what?
One and only.
Right.
You know,